At the same time I created it, the girl that was in the photograph actually contacted me and said, I really need to speak to you. And I said, oh, that's great timing because I've just started doing something with that image that I've sat on for 6 months and it's now taken another turn. And I think you're going to love it. And when I got on the conversation with her, she said, oh my goodness, I had a dream last night. I was floating in water. You were there as well. And then and then you appeared. And I said, Livy, wait till you see the image I have created. And it was her floating in water. And it was like, the timing was amazing.
Welcome to Don't Step on the Bluebells, the podcast where personal healing and transformation take center stage. I'm your host, Amanda Parker, and I'm a fellow seeker on the journey of personal growth. Join me as I delve into the stories of gifted healers, guides, and everyday people who have experienced remarkable transformations. Listen in as they share their practical wisdom to enrich your everyday life. And don't forget to hit subscribe and never miss a new episode. Welcome to today's episode of Don't Step on the Bluebells. I'm here with the incredibly talented Laura Antonia Abbott. Today we're going to be speaking all about healing with photography, and I'm super excited to have this conversation. Laura is a British fine art and conceptual photographer. She's also a certified Reiki master and a poet. And she has this incredible surrealist art that just completely captures your imagination. So, Laura, I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, excited to have this conversation, and feel very honored as well to be invited on here as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I have to say, I have your Instagram page open on the side here because I just love looking at these fantastical creations that you make and just this like the slightest hint of seeing the world through your eyes. So I'm really excited to just dive in a bit to understand how you even get the inspiration to do that kind of work. But I know that that's a big question, so we can ease in a little bit. I'd love to just hear, have you always been a photographer? Is this something you've been doing your whole life?
I've always been involved creatively. So it began with art from a very young age, from the age of 8 at boarding school. When I couldn't go home, I just spent every weekend creating, painting, enjoying the outdoors. And yeah, I loved it. I could just immerse myself. My parents would pick me up and I'd be covered in paint all over my face. And so it stemmed from there. And then as I went on, there was a point when I got to selecting subjects later in the middle, like sort of 15, where I nearly dropped it, which would have been really strange. I don't know why. But I continued with it. And, from anything from art, and then later it became textiles and photography and just anything I could get my hands on. But for me, photography was the one that was the most real. People could see it and it felt, back in those days, it was not putting the age on it, but it was negative films. And, it was the whole process of working with black and white, not knowing what you were going to get when you were taking things. And and it was just for me, it was more instant than doing a painting.
I love that you're talking about like the realism of photography, and yet you build worlds when you put your work out there into the world. So how did it come that you started to see, what more could actually be in an image than just the photo that you would shoot, for example, in black and white?
Well, I would definitely say a lot of it came from, looking at the images that I'd say churned out a lot today. Everyone thinks they're a photographer today. They've got their phone, they've got their camera. And because it's digital, it's instamatic. And so it's like a sort of, claiming it rightfully yours. So I had to sort of start to think differently because, I don't think reality was being contrived, just from normal pictures. So what looks like a simple thing from social media became very much something that, you didn't know. Was that the moment? Or was that, put together to contrive it, to make it look good for the audience? So I started to think about how I created my work and then creating worlds which are based on reality, but they are immersed into magical worlds. So therefore, I'm, going out there and I'm deliberately saying, this is whimsical, it's magical, but this is actually a true story. There's something in there. There's layered meanings, there's symbolism, and also, I think 'cause growing up, I wasn't actually never into Disney. I was never into, um, actually not. I always wanted to read books that were real stories about real scenarios, real experiences that people had. And so I think the lack of not having that, although I lived in my imagination, made me want to create these images, which maybe is part that I missed out on, the imaginative side of it. Um, but creating it in a different light so that you really are taken out of, you can't question, is this was this staged or not? Yes, it is staged, but it is actually full of fact and real stories and real images.
It's such a powerful way of expressing that, we think we have this idea of what's true and what's not true. But even that is not a fact. Even that is not 100% true. So you're actually just, lifting the veil off of that false belief that reality is exactly as we see it, and pulling and weaving together these elements that are all true and real. But it's almost like if I were to tell a story of something that happened to me when I was 10 years old, the way that I would piece together the elements would be probably very different than the reality of what was actually happening at that time. And it's like taking these snapshots of a moment and then pulling it together into the way that I observe or feel or experience reality, looking at that moment in time.
Hmm. And I also feel that, a lot of the work is also about the things that we don't necessarily see instantly. So it's bringing to life elements that we can't necessarily explain, but are also part of the person and the subject within the image, and our experiences of our inner worlds and the outer world and how that is reflected. Um, so I think, creating something that's more magical, it captures people's attention instantly rather than creating a real scenario or documentary style image, which, obviously is very telling. But I just feel like we're just inundated with so many images these days that everything becomes blurred. Yet we no longer know what is actually real and what isn't, what has been staged and what isn't. So I'm just putting the real into the staged, if you like.
Well, maybe since most people will be listening, maybe you could walk us through if there's an image that speaks to you or comes to mind in particular that you've created, and just what were the elements that brought that together?
Okay, so I think for me, one of the first things that I think of is the series I did called Nature Unmasked. And that is a personal story about myself and my connection, my healing through nature and being connected with nature. And it kind of came about during the pandemic when everything became quiet. We all went inwards. And actually, the only thing that I think brought us peace was taking ourselves into nature, if we were allowed to leave our house, and walking around, and engaging that. And that made us feel, embrace freedom. And, I've always been very passionate about the environment and about healing power of nature. So the image that I created was a series of three, but the one in particular that I'll talk about is called Bird. And this image also came about at the same time when my aunt was in a hospice. She was suddenly put in a hospice. She had breast cancer and she was a big fan of birds. And I had been creating this image at the same time that I heard this news. So it was one of the last conversations I had with her. And the whole image is created from, it's a landscape created from bird wings, but the bird wings are like the waves or the rolling hills. It's, people read it differently. And I love the fact that, everyone else sees it slightly differently. But also, what I enjoyed about putting this piece together is I had the vision, but I hadn't quite fully formalized how it was going to work out. We were very restricted. I was living in Asia at the time, in Singapore, and I went to Jurong Bird Park because it was totally empty. There was no one there. And I just walked into this bird cage of Victorian crowned pigeons. And I thought, oh my God, why am I here? What am I going to do? How am I going to take these birds? And all the birds, all the Victorian crowned pigeons, they all started to gather around me. And within a moment, it was like they were bowing and they all spread their wings out in this formation. And I was like, this is the moment. This is it. I can see it now. And I was just quick, like, hands shaking, taking the pictures, all these different angles of the birds. And that is how the landscape became the landscape and the image. But for me, it was almost, it's for me the sort of spiritual meaning of the Victorian crown pigeon, which has a lot of symbolism in different countries. But the one that resonates for me is the Native American one. And in some tribes, it was considered a sacred messenger between this world and the next. So it was a symbol of wisdom and divine guidance. And for me, it really felt in the moment what I was experiencing with my aunt in the hospice in the UK, not being able to see her and being able to share that element with her of the bird. Sadly, I thought she would live to see the final piece, so I never shared the full image. But this image has subsequently, last year, it was actually awarded and put up in Siena in Italy on one of the walls. So I love to think that it was my aunt that helped this bird fly and take off and land on in the middle of Italy and sort of showcase the power of nature and healing and feel connected with her as well in a different way. So that for me was like a really special piece. And and people look at it and they feel their own thing. But I like a lot of my pieces and a lot of the subjects within the piece. A lot of the stories are our personal stories and connections, and then people see something else from it. Or, they see the story, but then they resonate or they connect with it. But they don't necessarily know the full ins and outs. But, it's more than just a pretty picture.
Well, we're getting the inside scoop here. So I've heard you in our previous conversation sharing, stories of different images that you've created. And it's really, I mean, I have goosebumps as you're speaking because it's every single image that you create has such a depth of story. And there's a depth of like healing and wisdom and intuition and just inspiration that comes into each piece that it's mesmerizing, even just to hear you describe a piece that I'm not even looking at. So I can just feel the energy of what it is that you're putting out there, even before I've seen the image, or maybe I have seen the image. I have to look back at at all the images that I've seen of yours. But I love that there's so much, yeah, depth. And as you said, healing. So I'd love to hear just in this moment, what does healing mean to you?
Well, healing, I feel healing's incredibly powerful because I think some people feel that they don't have the right to claim that they need healing, because they might think that they only have small things in their life or, small stresses or things which are overwhelming for them, but they don't feel that that translates as enough to need help. It's the intricate mosaic of who we are within us and what we, internally go through. My idea of healing is really putting yourself out there, digging deep, going within yourself, reaching to depths that maybe we haven't reached before. And in going through those processes, we eventually rise and, we go through that cycle, we go through our ups and downs, and they're all part of our growth and transformation.
I think that's really powerful. I hear a lot of definitions of healing, which, yeah, come back to maybe coming back home to yourself. But I think you're bringing in a totally different element that some people feel like you have to be privileged or damaged enough or something to deserve healing. And the reality is that all of us have different elements of who we are or our lived experiences, physical, emotional, mental, whatever it is, that are worthy of healing, that we're worthy of receiving healing, that it's not something you have to deserve. It's not something just for a special few. It's really for all of us to claim that right to be well, to be, well, I guess there's no such thing as being fully healed,
No,
but to be
exactly.
on that journey.
And it is a journey. And I think, for me, healing bridges the inner world with our outer world. And that's a lot of, the work that I do with my photography is going into that inner world and then bringing it to the surface, and bringing it out to, you know, to unfold to other people, to see in a different light, that they don't feel alone, that there are other people out there going through similar things, whether they connect entirely to the story within the image, is not necessarily the point of it. It's actually what they take away, what resonates with their own experiences, with their emotions, with their own experiences, in life, and what it can add to them.
So that's, um, I mean, really, as a method of healing, that's incredibly powerful. The ability to visually showcase elements of a person and in a beautiful and whimsical way, but also in a way that really brings it up to the surface so that someone could really see or touch or tangibly engage with those images. Is this something that you like offer as a healing service, that you work with people and create these beautiful images as a healing?
Yes, so there's two ways that I work. One, I might have a client that comes in, say, for a Reiki session, and something is triggered in the session that is healing for them, but also I see it in a creative way of how this could also be valuable, not only for the healing of themselves, but for other people who have been through something similar. I will then maybe do the Reiki session, and then maybe, give them some time. I might propose, look, whilst you were having this experience, I had a vision of how I saw you in that moment, and how that moment could be useful if you were able to share that with me and share that moment. And for me, it's like they have a Reiki session, or it's a conversation. And within that conversation, things start to come up. I have a concept in my mind of how I see it working. And then we talk about it. And the deeper we go into it, that whole process on an intuitive level is like part of the unwrapping, part of the unlayering. And then those layers get added back into the image itself. And it's like a form of like release, of like a letting go. When you talk about, sometimes I give Reiki clients the idea of, they've got something on their mind or something needing to let go, that they write it down, or maybe they, you know, burn it in a fire or something, just to release that energy. And so that's the same kind of concept that I use in creating these images. It's like a release so that they can hopefully get to a place where they have transformed and they've grown beyond that position. And then when they look, if they want to have the image, or the image is then used for, exhibitions in other ways, it's like a reminder of, that's where I was and this is how far I've come. and not like a negative connotation. So I think that's the idea of it being slightly magical and whimsical at the same time, is it becomes this, although it was a painful moment or, traumatic or whatever, it can be seen as part of the growth and the beauty in, sometimes the things we go through, we don't realize at the time that actually there is the other side to some of this as well. It's part of our journey, it's part of who we become, builds resilience and strength within us. As I talk about this, I'm thinking about one particular piece that I created with a client who came in for a session. And then I proposed this image because she'd gone through a lot of ups and downs, like being a little bit lost in where she was going with her career, with her relationships. It was that stage of life. Which way am I going? Where is life taking me? And we had the session, which she found really helped her. I brought up things that, I pulled out things intuitively that she was struggling with. And I said, look, I think if you were open to this, this could also create a wonderful piece of art. It's about stripping. So the piece is called The Healing Pool. She actually was the one who said, I'll be fine to strip down, because it was like getting back to the bareness, our rawness, like, being totally naked, vulnerable, bearing all, and then rising from this healing pool. In the image is a butterfly above her. She's crouched on the ground in the middle of this beautiful landscape, again, bringing in the nature and the environment for healing. And the pool of water has a reflection of herself. So it's also, she's curled up, she's looking into this pool of water. She's going inward, she's looking at the reflection of how she sees herself, the vulnerability of this bare landscape, the vulnerability of the nudity in the picture, and then the rise of transformation with this butterfly hovering, because I knew that she would eventually get to that place if she stripped back everything and almost began again, which I would say is one of my success stories, because I feel that I've seen the transformation. She's gone on this massive journey since. And, although it's been a couple of years, I've sensed that she's still on that journey, I think, even today. Um, so yeah, that was powerful. And there's a little, pool of water as well there. There's sort of the last of the residual of the emotion coming, on her back surface. And then the fact that this butterfly is slightly reflected, and, there's all these tiny details slightly reflected into that pool of water, the potential of something else beyond the inner world.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and you've just touched on it a bit, but do you ever get to hear a follow-up or understand how either the image or the healing process transforms after the piece is created?
It's wonderful because I do, there's moments that I create the pieces. Maybe the person doesn't actually necessarily notice that maybe that was the catalyst in getting to the final end. But I have certainly noticed that that might have been the starting point that then has led them on a journey of healing and going to other, practitioners, or going into different steps and finding their own way along the journey of really confronting maybe something that they feared or something that they've held within them for so long. But it's that little doorway that opens, just going into the possibility of creating something. It can be emotional as well. I did do a series with a girl who had gone through a lot of grief and loss. In those moments when we're actually creating the image as well, as much as, it's about grief and everything, as much as there is a moment, there is also the rawness still within that person, which, you can capture. And it's really, actually, I think that's part of the healing, is that the person, if I ask them, are they willing for this to be a creative project? This one was to do with suicide. So it was kind of like, for me, I feel this is something, a lot of the impact from suicide is the fact that people, are suffering and they don't feel that they can talk. They don't have that person they can talk to. So if the person is willing from having that experience of losing someone to that, to be able to raise more awareness about it and the impact. I feel there's the personal healing for them, and it doesn't have to be so intimate, but then what we create puts on that ripple effect of reaching out into communities, um, to people, and it takes on its own form of healing. So it begins with one person, but then we're vibrating and reaching further out into communities.
It makes me think of in coaching, I mean, in many healing professions, but I'll speak from coaching specifically, sometimes just witnessing, like witnessing, listening, allowing someone to just share what that experience is can so often be the healing on its own. And then this is actually like the witnessing and creating something that can also have that ripple effect outwards at a bigger scale. I guess that would be has the potential to touch people because the energy of what you've created is there. It's a part of the piece.
And I think sometimes, the ones that resonate are the ones that are sort of loaded with so much stuff. Even when I'm creating it, I go through the process of the planning, the conversation with the subject, and then, we shoot it. But then when it comes to the editing, that becomes also another process. And I can actually sometimes feel the vibration. I get to a point and I know that this image feels like one that's going to be traveling many places, and it sounds like, it's not to be cocky. I mean, it's like a sort of vibration that comes out of it in the same way that you have in a healing session. You get that energetic vibration from people as you can feel the release of something that's been stored in there. It's the same with the art pieces, and then the colors that get put into it add those other layers as well. Um, and they take on different stages.
Well, Elizabeth Gilbert, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her work. She wrote Big Magic and she wrote Eat, Pray, Love once upon a
Yes.
time. So in Big Magic, one of the concepts that she brings up is that the work wants to be created. So she has no idea what it wants to become. It knows, and it's going to become that. You can either choose to take that project on and help it come to life, or it's going to find someone who will. But what I'm hearing is that you're really co-creating with the piece what it wants to be, as well as you're feeling that energy as it's coming in. There's this dance together of like helping it come to life because it has a message itself.
That is exactly how it feels. It might start for something. And I have had that experience where I set out, I had this idea, and I actually approached someone to participate in this piece. And it took on another life. Like, I envisioned this thing. I went to this whole setup, and I even was going to Lapland, and I'd put half of it together, and I thought, yeah, this is going to be in the snow, and I shot the whole thing. I had it all formulated, and it just would not go, and it sat on my hard drive for about 6 months, and then suddenly I decided, this is not what it's about. It's about this. And I started adding in all these other elements to it. At the same time I created it, um, the girl that was in the photograph actually contacted me and said, "I really need to speak to you. I'm in Mexico City. Let's have a call." And I said, "Oh, that's great timing, because I've just started doing something with that image that I've sat on for 6 months, and it's now taken another turn, and I think you're going to love it." And when I got on the conversation with her, she said, "Oh my goodness, I had a dream last night. I was floating in water. You were there as well. And then and then you appeared." And what I said, "Livy, wait till you see the image I have created." And it was her floating in water. And it was like, the timing was amazing. We hadn't seen each other for over a year or something. And I was like, this is what the piece was about. It was about this. And, she works as a dream worker and subconscious. And here she was having a dream about the image that I had then transformed into something else. And it was amazing because the water was very symbolic. She's a scorpion as well. So I had added that element in. And the scorpion is also about, the darker self and the internal stuff that we go through. And it was the multiple versions of herself and how she sees herself in the waking world, in the subconscious, and, being sort of the healer through dream working for all people. And I thought, sometimes you think, well, I've gone off piste with this. I haven't stuck to the plot, but actually this is what it was supposed to be. This is how it was supposed to evolve. And that's why I was so stuck, because that wasn't the vibration it was supposed to send out. And it has traveled, this one.
I've had many teachers in like psychic development courses that I've taken share that you never question the information that you're receiving. Even if it doesn't make sense to you, share it with whoever the person is maybe that you're reading for, because you never know what that symbolism is going to be for them. So if an image comes to mind for me, I was in a course once, and I don't normally smell things, but in this moment, it was like this whiff of, I think it was oleander. I wouldn't know what oleander smells like on an average day. It's not a plant or a flower that would come to mind, I mean, ever. And I was in the reading, I said, yeah, I started to smell oleander. And the woman was like, oh my God, my mom had this plant in front of the house and it was an oleander. It was her favorite. And my stepdaughter just gifted me the same plant for my birthday. And I was just like, oh my God. So even though it doesn't seem to make sense or resonate, on a conscious intellectual level, you're actually in a way an open channel that you're allowing that to come in and getting your head out of the way so that it can really translate and become what it wants to be, and that those ideas can come through in the way they're meant to.
100%. And that's over time. That is what I've learned. A lot of the time, I've created things in the past and I couldn't necessarily, I knew I could see it, I could feel it, but I couldn't necessarily fully explain to people what exactly I was doing. And you always feel that you have to have everything lined up, sketched up, aligned. This is the plan. You've got to stick to every angle. But I've learned over time that is not necessarily what it's about. We have to be in flow. We have to be fluid, and you have to follow what comes. What comes. Sometimes you set out for something else, but actually, this other story is more important, and this is the one that needs to be told. Um, and even like you mentioning the flowers now, even when I use flowers in my work, every flower is used because of the meaning of that flower and the resonance that it adds to that picture. So everyone doesn't have to be an expert looking at the flower, looking at the photos with the flowers, but there is the hidden layer meaning, and maybe that energy attracts people or draws people in to the work as well.
I just have this feeling or this sense of you just building worlds. You're just creating these like magnificent worlds that we get to touch on, and no one could ever understand the full nuance of your creative process, of how all that comes in, of the client situation and everything, but you're really it's like entering a fantasy world and just exploring all these elements that are there beyond a beautiful image, beyond something that you could just see and go, wow, that's pretty, I'd like to hang that up. There's so much layer and nuance in each piece that I can imagine will touch people. They'll have no idea why, but the energy and resonance will be there.
And I love asking people, what do they see in that piece, or what resonates? Why do they like that particular piece? Because it is, it's so subjective sometimes. And sometimes, they're drawn to the emotion. Sometimes they maybe just see it as an image that they just like. But there is always, it's so fascinating because what you think people are like as well is not necessarily what they do like. So it's, and I think it's a great teller, and it's almost like a kind of, it's another thing to look at, how is it enjoyed, or what reactions people get from it, and how it makes them feel, the emotion for a lot of the pieces, there is emotion, because I don't think everything I create, they are shot in, I used to take them more in locations, and the world is created in a real location. But then maybe the sky doesn't quite look right. So I use a sky from, another location or something. But everything is really put into place. It's only as time evolves and the deeper I go into people's healing journeys that the world almost can't be one that is necessarily recognizable, because it isn't necessarily easy to kind of understand, So I like the idea of making it more magical and whimsical, because it also takes away a little bit from too much of the, the suffering within it as well.
So, how is it that you began to weave the Reiki and the photography together? Was that natural? Was that intentional? What did that process look like?
It's fascinating because um I think subconsciously I had been doing it before I discovered Reiki.
Mm.
And then Reiki made me realize, oh my goodness, this is what I've been doing all this time. And again, it's that sort of guidance that you can't explain. So in the past, I always found I used to attract people that were, had a lot of issues or had problems, or they always wanted to tell me their stories, whether it was on a night out or in the student bar, or, arrived in the airport and someone's telling me something random. But I used to think it was quite funny, and I didn't understand why everyone wants to tell me these things. But I also enjoyed the communication. And I think it's also almost part of the preparation for being prepared to the variety of different scenarios that people go through and experiences. And then you can add it. So for me, then finding Reiki made me understand deeper maybe why I attracted these people before. And it gave a bit more power to the work as well, even though I feel that the work subconsciously had that element to it. And I think it's also that I am drawn to understanding deeply. I think, even when I was younger, that's where the poetry came in for me as well. I'd put everything into writing, and I would put it in symbolism and metaphors to hide. So people, if anyone found it, they wouldn't necessarily know exactly what I was talking about, but they would get something else from it. And that led into my photography. And then with Reiki, it's a similar thing, how I intuitively read the energies of people's bodies. It comes through in the same symbols and ways that I've been using in my photography. So it's like these little languages that I've been using throughout a lifetime that all get woven together and kind of complete the circle. I love to call it like the fifth element. The fifth Reiki was like the fifth element, the fifth language that came together, and everything became clear. I was like, oh my goodness, this is what I'm doing.
So, Reiki was something that you did a formal training in then
Yes,
later on.
I did. And I actually did it with one of the people I think you've had on your podcast,
Danny
Danny,
Vandeves, yes.
the amazing
Hi,
Danny.
Danny.
um, yeah, I actually went to Danny for Reiki sessions myself. And again, that's, why I thought I don't have anything to really unwrap. And then I was like, oh, hell yeah. There's a whole
I
load
don't
to
need to
unwrap.
be healed. I'm fine.
So those sessions took me on a long journey and then led me back to her. And she said, I think you're going to be going deep into studying something. And I was like, actually, Danny, this is what I want to come and do. Teach me. So that's how it started. And yeah, and it's just taken me places as well. It's taken me further. It's given more depth, I think, to my work, with new ideas that I've got that I'm working on at the moment. That sort of weaving more of Reiki and creativity and spirituality all together, and sort of more of an offering, but also an impact of a healing way as well, but a different form, because it won't necessarily be someone's personal subject, but it'll be reaching out to inspire people into transformation, into growth, and and looking at it in a slightly different way.
What have been some of the challenges that you faced in doing this work? So, what obstacles have you come against along the way?
So I think it's being able to read people to know the right moment. I think a lot of people are willing, but I think being very intuitive, I think I read who's the right person to approach and who's not. So I guess that makes less stumbling blocks. Um, but I'd say in my pathway of photography, a stumbling block for me at the very beginning was being a woman in the industry that was mainly men. And, I worked first at the beginning as, photographer's assistant, and I'd be literally, I was always, I'll do anything. Help me carry this wrought iron gate. And it literally was this giant wrought iron gate. And I'd be lugging it with all the men because there's no one else there. And I was thinking, what am I doing? This is like the limit. But it was the way, you had to, that time, it was work with someone to learn the ropes and then go out on your own. And all the work that I loved doing was, the fashion photographers, and a lot of them uh, who I encountered were the men. And then it was harder to sort of break in. So, but creating what I create now has actually always been my passion. But I'd say that was really a stumbling block because I kind of thought I don't need to prove how strong I am or whatever. I just need to do it. And
Oh,
yes.
I just really want to like hone in on that because I think so many of us face that we already know what we want to do. And I think especially in modern times with so much accessibility online to like teachers and experts and whatever. I'm like, I really want to write. I need to find a teacher or a course or this or that. Like, no, actually, you just need to sit down and write. Like, you need to sit
Exactly.
down and do the thing. It's okay to also have teachers and learn from people, but that cannot be the obstacle that stands in the way of doing the thing that you're called to do.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for a long time that did stand in the way. I was like, this is what I was saying. Like, I firmly believe in breaking rules. You
Yeah.
don't have to go down this process of, I have to study at university. When you're doing something creative, you could actually, and even now, the door is open for people just to launch themselves and create a project, whatever it is, go out there and, you can get on social media, you can build your own network, and you can just go straight out there. But when I was studying, it was more like, oh, this is the way you do it. This is how you get into the industry. And then I was like, maybe I don't want to be in this industry. So I always wanted to do fashion actually. And it was like, well, everyone's bitchy or bickering. And so maybe I will just step out of that and do my own thing. And I love it because there's more meaning. I'm creating something for myself, but I'm creating something for someone else. And that is also being shared and giving joy or healing to other people as well. So it doesn't just begin with myself, it will begin with someone's story. It becomes something else.
Mm. Was there ever any like self-doubt about your abilities or like was there anything tied up in that or did you feel really just motivated by creating?
I definitely, there's always doubt, there's always fear. I mean, I'd love to know that person that just walks out there and like, I've got it all, I'm going to do it. I tell myself I can do it. But I've always been passionate. I think, art, I started it for so long when I was very small. So it's always been my pathway, or part of my pathway. Um, but there have definitely been steps and hurdles and moments of like, can I do this? But I've stuck with it. I'd actually say that actually Reiki gave me confidence because I've been doing photography for my lifetime, but I was always very cautious. But when I started Reiki, I was like, open the door, come in, clients, in you come. Everyone's knocking. And I'm like, my goodness, if I can do this with Reiki, I can do this with photography. This is ridiculous. Why did it take me, let's not
Mhm.
number the years of stalling and like, oh, can I do it? Oh, almost. Maybe this is not the right moment. Maybe I should wait a bit longer. And Reiki, it was just like, boom, open the doors, straight in. And I was like, oh, I'll do this with photography as well. So it's given me the courage. That has given me the courage. And I think more belief in, you kind of know what unless you're totally lost, you kind of know where you want to go. It's just having the confidence and the faith that, what can go wrong? You fail and you don't achieve it. But if you don't even have a go at it, you'll never know. And I always have firmly believed in just do it and see what happens. If it fails, it fails. As long as it doesn't, you don't leave a trail of disaster. It's okay.
My coach said to me the other day, as an encouragement, because there's a few different things that I'm in the process of like building, launching, creating, and they all scare me, as they always do. So I go into fear, like, why am I doing this? Am I the right person? All these people have more experience. All these like doubts come to the surface, my own doubts. And his advice was to just take the next step. Whatever it is that you want to do or that you're afraid of or that you're nervous about, just take one more step forward. That's it. You'll have more information then. And of course, that's like a slippery slope. One step leads to the next, But rather than looking at like that whole big picture, like I'm going to be a photographer now or something that might really intimidate you, it's like, well, what if you just take photos tomorrow? What could
Exactly.
happen?
I think it should always be, baby steps. So that's what I'm telling myself, because I'm about to launch my online photography store and I've been stalling for about sort of 4 months. Oh no, I can't quite find that printer. Okay, so I'll just take a breather. And I'm like, no, if I just do a little something, contact someone else, just a little extra, like you were saying, those little steps, they're taking you there rather than backing down with so much fear that you feel like you can't lift yourself beyond that. And it is a challenge because it is, I think fear is one of our greatest challenges. I would say something deeper than that, but I've lost it. So
It's good. It's good. It is a big challenge.
yeah.
It's also a motivator. So I tend to think that the things that I'm most afraid of, or if I have a client, the things they're really afraid of, that's usually like the catalyst for what's really going to open up. So in a way, the fear is almost like a knowing, because you know that everything that comes on the other side of that is going to change your life potentially.
100%. Actually, because that's exactly what I would say, because that has always, fear has actually always been my stumbling block. Fear, and then it builds into anxiety and potential breakdown. But in the past, I'll never forget. I was asked, spur of the moment, can you photograph 300 extras from a casting agency? And here's a camera, digital camera, which I hadn't used before in my life. So that seemed really daunting when you can just twiddle lots of knobs and take a picture rather than just, connect it to your lights. And I felt so sick. I remember calling my sister and saying, I can't do this. I feel so sick. And she's like, Laura, you'll probably always feel like that. And if you don't take this step, you'll never do it. And 100%, I feel fear in every time, even when I'm doing a personal project, I feel fear and I get anxious. But also that's part of it, like you just said. It is that the boost, it's that passion that's actually blended with that fear that actually is the catalyst and the drive that excels us to get where we want to get. So it's kind of ignoring that and trying not to cave in too much to those emotions and excelling and actually using it as the power to push you forward,
Yes. So people are going to be listening. Now I know you're launching your photography store. So by the time this episode is launched, we're going to have that URL out in the world, maybe.
Well, no, I love it because I only say something because then that also is the drive forward. It has to be done now because I've said it. And actually, I was communicating with someone yesterday about using their printer yesterday, and I nearly cancelled it because I had so
Please
much
do.
prep.
Please do,
And I thought,
because
no.
I'm ready to browse your store.
Fantastic.
So how else can people get in touch with you, and for what should they get in touch with you?
So yeah, well, you can get in touch with me if you want to collaborate on a photo shoot. Maybe you have your own healing journey you would like to share with me, that you think would help others out there. And we could collaborate and put it into something. Because when I do create these things, it is part of, I communicate with the sitter, and it's a collaboration on how they want to do, and then it evolves as we go. But if it evolves, I always share, this is how I see it. Do you think that reflects well and with the experience, and will it help others? So that's what I would advise. And what was the other question?
Well, so that's one thing that you do is the photography. You also do the Reiki sessions.
Yeah,
So people, that's in person, is that online?
I do distance healing. I have clients scattered everywhere from Romania or Kenya or Singapore, wherever it is. And I do in person. I have a studio that I do it in, my own little healing room, which I have. So people come in, and it also involves, intuitive reading and a little bit of coaching and guidance. So I do that as well.
And that's in Lisbon?
In Lisbon, yes.
Yes, very nice. All right, that's worth a trip over to Lisbon.
No, exactly. You can
Yeah.
use it as an excuse, or just stay in the safety of your home, and I'll do a distance
Yeah.
one.
So, aside from the website, which we're excited to see, what else are you looking forward to in the future?
I'm working on a new photo series, which is actually about elements, uh, earth, air, water, fire, ether. So it's also a kind of journey, earth, not necessarily our usual things, not just plants and whatever. It's also ancestral, and our connection to the past, and the healing that comes from our ancestors as well, and fire, transformation and growth. So I'm really excited because I'm working on fire, and I found this time I approached a lady, and I've got my fire woman who I feel is fire. So I'm really excited because I know there's a reason I've picked her. I've got Maya angles and twists, and I know when we get into the process of shooting it, it's going to be adding elements of actually her, I think, as well. Um, and that's sort of working towards an oracle deck that I'd like to create. So that will probably take a lot longer, but this is the start. This is the catalyst and the starter, for the ideas. So I'm excited about that. And I did have a nice proposal yesterday from someone, but I don't know if I'm allowed to discuss that yet. So, but that involves art and something for New Year, getting involved with other artists. So I'm excited about that one as well.
Ooh, that is exciting. And as you said, the elementals, I'm like, I know a number of shamanic practitioners who are going to be very excited about the series.
Well, I'd be happy if anyone wants to give any of their own feedback or, insight into what those elements mean to them. That would be really powerful as a request to any listeners.
Yeah. And so definitely if you want to give that feedback and you're listening, then you can get in touch with Laura on her Instagram as well.
On my Instagram, and I have my website, lauraaphotography.com, or Laura
Mhm.
Antonia Photography.
I'll
I'm gonna
link to it all in
Yes,
the show
please.
notes.
I'm going to get it mixed up. It's lauraaphotography.com. And you can connect with me through there. And you can also actually connect to my Reiki, which is Soul Calma, or Calma, because I'm in Portugal, soulcalma.com. And you can book sessions through that as well.
If someone is just starting out on their own journey, what advice would you give to them as they're beginning this journey forward?
Well, definitely break all the rules and just get out there. Just pick up a camera, just experiment, just go with what you feel drawn to. I think you feel this need that has to be, perfect. But, experimenting, a lot of my stuff, I'd say, even though I did a whole degree in photography, I studied part of it in Spain, a lot of my process has been self taught as well, because there's only so much. The thing that I think is harder, it's not being the photographer, it's the ideas. And the ideas are what you need to grow. and that, I love to brainstorm and, you know, research into books or ideas, go to exhibitions and galleries and talk to people and find out what's new in their life, because it's hard finding something that hasn't been done and that isn't different. And I don't think anything is entirely unique, but you can certainly add elements. But I think if you really go within yourself and take a more personal touch, that is where you really get the pleasure. And that's when you start to attract people, because people can feel that passion and that emotion.
Beautiful closing words. I'm so pleased that we could have this conversation. Everyone who's listening, please do go check out Laura's work. It is absolutely inspiring and dreamy and just builds such gorgeous visions of the world in a way you've never seen it before. So I'm so grateful that you've been here to share your work and your healing power with us, and cannot wait to see all of these projects that are building in the future.
Thank you. And actually, there was one thing if you would allow me to share, I had a poem that I've written, pre-written, not just for this, but I think it's very relevant to the conversation. If it inspires people, if I can read that. We are everything and nothing, weightless in the dark, patiently waiting our place in time. We sink, we float, we crumble, we stall. We breathe, we weep, we rise, we soar. A billion atoms cascading into stars, tiny grains in search of light. We are nothing and everything and so much more. So that's my little inspiration for people out there needing some light.
Oh, thank you so much. That's beautiful. And yeah, I'm feeling very inspired as we're closing. I'm even losing my voice now. So thank you so much for joining us. And to everyone has tuned in, thank you for listening to this episode of Don't Step on the Bluebells. And I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Don't Step on the Bluebells. If you enjoyed this conversation, please give the podcast a 5-star rating wherever you listen. And don't forget to hit subscribe and follow along so you never miss a new episode.